Hi Booktube, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, I'm Marilyn, and I've had a few new subscribers lately, so thank you so much. I wanted first, before I go into my mid-month wrap-up, to thank everyone who has sent me messages regarding my last video, and which I'll have linked below, which is Instead of Quitting Booktube. And I've had many messages of encouragement, and I really appreciate them. And also some suggestions, because I am starting a new channel in a few weeks. That also will be down in the description box. It's going to be called While I Age, Choosing to Thrive at 75. Well, I said that all. Now, today I have a question. Can you do a mid-month wrap-up when you only have a few books? Well, I'm doing one because I've only read a few books, and the books that I've read haven't all been a success. But as it is with reading, you always learn something from every book you read that you finish, even if it's only one tidbit. And I think I have some books that maybe weren't for me, but maybe will be for you. But first, let's start with the books that I didn't pick up and that maybe I should have, and maybe I felt that I wasn't in the mood for them, but then it turned out that they might have been better than the books that I read in the terms of mood. So the first one is a Ruth Rendell, which is usually my go-to for books when I'm feeling down, and that is A Sight for Sore Eyes. And I didn't make, it's not a real DNF. I took it out of the library. I'm going to get to it, going to order it again and get to it at some point. And the other one is a Ruth Rendell, and I talked about it in my last video, and that is Keys to the Street. All these are more standalone thriller type books that she wrote instead of the detective ones that she wrote. And I'm sort of, sometimes I like her thriller standalones and sometimes I don't. But I wanted to, I started them and I thought, yeah, they're interesting. They got good reviews, but not right now. So what did I do? Of course, I went down a rabbit hole of watching many videos in the last few weeks. And most of those videos were the best of 2024. Now I'm going to start with the one book that I have that wasn't read on Kindle. That book is by Jean Rhys, Good Morning Midnight, and I'll show it to you. The cover is very apropos to what the book is about. But I got this book. I had never heard, maybe I heard of Jean Rhys. I don't know if you say it Rice or Rhys, but I found out that another book that I read this during this month, during these 2 weeks, this was that author's, which I will come to, favorite author, or an author that she looked to for inspiration. Well, this is a lot. This book was a lot, and it was very depressing. So let me just tell you a little bit about it. So it's a modernist novel, and the author wrote a very popular book that's on Booktube called The Wide Sargasso Sea, which you probably heard of because it's a prequel to Jane Eyre. And I haven't read that book yet, but I have an idea about what it's about because the author, Jean Rhys, was called Creole, which meant she was British but born in the West Indies, as they were called then. And I'm not sure which of the islands. I think it was Dominica, or which is a very small island in the Caribbean. And I know the Caribbean because my father was born in Puerto Rico, but I've never been to Dominica. And I seem to remember that's the island that she was born to English parents. Well, okay, I said on Goodreads that it was depressing. This was perhaps what we would call autofiction today, and not exactly a memoir, so it was fiction, but I'm sure that from reading about her, that a lot of this book was taken from real life after reading about her. Okay, so what is the book about? Okay, so the good part is it was set in Paris, and I looked up a lot of the places that she mentions in the book, and they're still there. And the streets, of course, are still there. And I'll get back to why that's important to me, because this book is depressing. It's really depressing. It's about a woman named Sarah Jensen. In my view, she suffers from self-hatred, and it is shown in almost every page of the book. She's also an alcoholic, and in real life, the author, Rhys, suffered from alcoholism. So the book has two timelines, and sometimes they're not very clear which timeline you're in, and you have to sort of read it closely. But the first timeline is when she's young, she goes to Paris. In real life, she went as sort of, in the right after the First World War. So she went to seek maybe an artistic life, because in real life, she was, it said, an unsuccessful model in England. So she went to Paris, and most creative people went to Paris at that time. But she's practically starving, and it goes back and forth. And the second timeline is when she's in her 40s, and this is around the 1930s, and she's living a similar life, but she has a little bit more money because she was left some money, after one of her relatives died. If it sounds confusing, it's because it is a little bit confusing. She has a very destructive personality, and she goes back and forth when she was in her 20s, she gets married. That's when she's starving, and the book is just very, very, it shows this brutal part of Paris during the 30s that I've read before in many books, particularly Alberta and Freedom, the Alberta and Jacob series by Cora Sandell. So instead of me telling you, let me read you something that I printed out from this book to show you why I think it was depressing, but yet well written. So she says, "Now I no longer wish to be loved, beautiful, happy, or successful. I want one thing and one thing only, to be left alone. Yes, I am sad, sad as a circus lioness, sad as an eagle without wings, sad as a violin with only one string and that one broken, sad as a woman who is growing old." So, yeah, you get the picture. But if you like that kind of writing, which is, you can tell she's a good writer, you might enjoy this book. Now, why I was drawn to this book, that it was in Paris, and there's one incident where a waiter, she goes back to the same places she went when she was young, and it's so sad to me to think that a woman in her 40s was considered old, and she is hounded by men and gigolos, and that is in the 40s part of the book. But she's not happy when she went in her 20s or when she went back in her 40s. But it's a really interesting look at Paris at that time. And this is what I got out of it, beside the writing, of course. As one waiter, she keeps on imagining people in the places that she went to are saying in French. And there's a lot of French in this book. Some of it is translated, some is not. And she's imagining that people are saying, isn't that woman? She's so old now, and wasn't she here before? And isn't she drinking too much? And she's imagining that people are saying that about her. But one waiter makes a remark that I felt, and he said, everyone comes back to Paris. And I feel that way personally because I've been to many places in my life. I've traveled when I was young, and the only place that really pulls me back is Paris, which is kind of unusual because I don't speak French. And I lived in Madrid. You would think that I would want to go back to Spain or some other Spanish-speaking country, but yet there's something about Paris. There's just something about Paris that draws people back. And that waiter said it all. I hope I'm not talking too much about this book, but it made a big impression on me in a lot of ways of, how mental illness and alcohol and having self-hatred can really ruin your life. So if you liked the other book she wrote, A Wide Sargasso Sea, if you like that kind of writing, and I haven't read it, I will read it though, I suggest you read this very short book, Good Morning Midnight. So that was a book I read because of another book that I talked about last week, and I found it also on someone's best of book. Well, this one I didn't find on a best of book. This one, it was because of the one I found on a best of book, and I'll have it here again, and that's The Princess of 72nd Street. Okay, now this was a book that I want to read again, maybe even again and again. How can I describe this book? It was on a best of list, and the booktuber, who shall remain nameless, I might have named her in my last video, but I think she described this book as being a bohemian Sex in the City. It is not that. It is so not that. And I'm from New York City, and I know where West 72nd Street is, and I've been there in the 70s. What created this book was the pain that this author felt. Now, let me just say that this is a book of a person suffering from severe, what we call now bipolar disorder. And then they called manic depression. And I know this well because my mother suffered from what they called manic depression. However, not every bipolar disorder is alike. And now I don't know too much about the different types of bipolar disorder, but I know that this woman who takes on an alter ego, and I'm not against alter egos. I have taken on many alter egos, and I think people with mental illness, mine is anxiety, take on alter egos in order to able to function in their world. So she takes on an alter ego called Princess Esmeralda. What I didn't like about this book was that her illness was never explained, even though she goes into hospitals in certain points of, she talks about having been in hospitals. And this is a very true telling of what New York was like in the 70s on the west side of New York. That part I knew from being there. Even the bar was named, I think it was called Tweeds, where the Good Bar murder happened, and she mentions it. So that makes me think that this is more of a memoir than it is fiction. But like I said, fiction, but she lived a lot of it. So she lives in the West 70s on a particular street that she adopts. And she adopts this street. It's a harsh street. And she is escaping various men in her life. One of them are one of them is her ex-husband, and many other men. Now, I was very confused that this book was called Feminist, and it is being brought back into print as feminist literature, because I felt that, but what do I know? I'm not an expert in feminism, but it's a lot of her looking for love through men who are unsuitable. Let me just say first that this book has exaggeration in it. So we're not sure, even when she's telling her story, she's an unreliable narrator because she's going through some episodes, sort of periods in her life when she's experiencing this, where she's into the bipolar ups of the bipolar disorder, so she's an unreliable narrator, and she talks about, for example, a psychiatrist who's insane, who talked her husband into throwing her out, and who has an unusual interest in her ex-husband. And so there's a lot of, we don't know if it's true. And that annoyed me in the first part of the book. But the illness feels so real. It feels so real. In the second part of the book, we have some ends tied up, and we find out who Princess Esmeralda really is, what really happened to her during those periods in her life when she would go out in the street in her nightgown and think she was, the princess of 72nd Street. And it's very sad, but you can see that the author has experienced this or something like this kind of mental illness, and it felt true. Even though the part where she's in her bipolar, I can't call it a phase, but it's almost like she's out of her own body. It's an out-of-body experience. And then in the end, she has to put down that alter ego because she finds out how destructive it was. But one thing about the book is that nobody ever really helps her with the mental illness. She talks about going into Bellevue, which is a mental hospital, and never wanting to go there because it takes away her soul. And I understand that in a lot of mental illness, knowing people in my family, that they don't want to take medicine because they feel that the good feeling that they feel when they're in the bipolar highs is worth it. But I think in the end she realizes what exactly happened to her. And yeah, so I hope I've explained this. I want to read this book again. And if you've read it, let me know what you think down in the comments, because I really think that this is a good book that I want to reread during Mental Health May. But I want to have other books that discuss this book or discuss the author, who was a very creative person and possibly was also mentally ill, maybe more than possibly. So if you're interested in this book, let me know if you've read it. I really, really want to know if you've read it. I don't know if it was the best time for me to read this book because I'm going through a lot, but I know that it's an important book. And how it's feminist, I'm not sure, but I think that one reviewer said that it's a woman who decided to do whatever she wanted, and she didn't want to be ordinary. But there's a big difference about not wanting to be ordinary and suffering from a severe mental illness, which puts you in danger. That's all I'll say about that, and I'm very passionate about that subject. Now, the next book I also don't have, but I will put it over here. It's called Leonard and Hungry Paul. Okay, this was a favorite in a lot of best of 2024. And the author is Rónán Hession. And I know that Shawn of Shawn Breathes Books has had him on the channel. And don't get me wrong, I did not hate this book. I found it's supposed to be something like what is called uplit, which is like an uplifting type of literature that we read to feel better. So that's why I really wanted to read it. But I can't say I loved it. I can't say I loved it. Okay, so what is it about? So we have these two friends, Leonard and Hungry Paul. And we never find out why Hungry Paul is called Hungry Paul. And that irked me. Somebody in Goodreads review said that it didn't bother them. But I wanted to know, because he wasn't eating all the time and he wasn't fat, or nothing about his weight was discussed. But anyway, so they're both friends, introverted 30-something-year-old men, possibly suffering, no, I shouldn't say suffering, possibly on the autism spectrum. But they're happy. At least Hungry Paul is happy. And he doesn't understand why maybe his sister, for example, worries about him. And he's living with his parents. They're both living with their parents. But in the beginning of the book, Leonard's mother dies. And so there is some grief going on with Leonard. And we feel that. Now, the good parts of it. Okay, there are some quotes that are really quotes to write down. But I was always, well, I should tell you the quote first, right? Though this was all quite new to him, he can see that making big decisions was just as consequential as not making them. Either way, you are committing to something. We are never entirely outside of life's choices. Everything leads somewhere. So this is something that one of the characters discovers toward the end of the book. Now, what I didn't like about this book, I shouldn't say the writing of this book, is that everyone is happy. I should say there's no problems. Everything is fine. Everything is happy. The character development on the peripheral people around them are very, how shall I say it? They're not drawn as well as I would have liked. Another thing that bothered me was that it's told in each person's voice. So you're never in one or two people. You're in 4 or 5 people. One is the father of, who's the father of Hungry Paul's father. Then we're into Hungry Paul's sister's voice. We're into, of course, Hungry Paul's voice. We're into Leonard's voice. I think that's it. But I have to be honest, they all kind of sounded similar. They were all very uplifted. Nobody had any problems. They're going through a wedding where Hungry Paul's sister is getting married. And you're waiting for some kind of development to happen. And it's not that kind of a book. If you're looking for a plot, you're not going to find it here. And I didn't mind that. I don't mind that. I like the main characters well enough. I think that the point of the book is that you can be happy even if you're not so-called successful in life, even if you live in your parents' basement, or you're not a loser, so to speak. You can be happy no matter what. Oh, I don't believe in the loser thing anyway. But so I think also what a little bit turned me off is that they for me personally, is one thing they do together is play board games. And although I liked board games when I was younger, they would get together in Hungry Paul's house and play board games. And there is a slight development where Leonard meets a girl that he likes. And that part was interesting. But like I said, the characters seem very same to me. And I wanted to root for someone. And you feel that they're happy already. So there's nothing really to root for, if you know what I mean. So I didn't hate the book. I liked it. I didn't love it. I'm glad I read it. I'm interested in reading more by this author. But like I said, I felt his voice was too out front for me. I felt like this is what he was telling us to feel, if that makes any sense to you. So the next book I want to talk about is an also feel-good book. And I'll have it here. It's called Before the Coffee Gets Cold. And it's a translated Japanese, I would say fantasy. And maybe that's one of my problems with it. It's by Toshikazu Kawaguchi. Toshikazu. I lived in Japan. I should know how to say these names better. And it's translated by Geoffrey Trousselot. Geoffrey Trousselot or Trousselot. So I'll say that I almost DNF'd this book because very early in the book, a ghost appears, and that's usually it for me. I'm not into ghost stories or magical realism, but the story is very sweet. It's very Japanese, and that's what kept me reading it, because I did live in Japan. So what is it about? In a small back alley in Tokyo, there is a cafe which has been serving carefully brewed coffee for more than 100 years. This cafe is very magical, and the book answers the age-old question: what would you change if you can go back in time? And the title says it all. You can go back in time until before the coffee gets cold. And we're introduced to a bunch of characters who have various problems and want to go back in time to see what happens, to rectify things, for many, many reasons. There's four, so it's interconnected stories. All right. So, how shall I say this? I felt this was more of a young adult book. It was, the magical realism part was kind of cute. The ghost didn't really bother me as much. I kept on reading after the ghost part. And the characters, like I said, were very Japanese. For example, let me just say what I mean by that. Like, one character is said that she acted the way she wanted because she had a heart condition, and even when she couldn't do activities like do gymnastics or whatever, running, she would do it in her way, like go into a wheelchair and have somebody push her, and that this, even though that's not considered right in Japan, she pulled it off because she was that kind of person that everybody liked. So we know already by her saying that being different in Japan is it's very difficult to pull off, and all of these characters are very Japanese in the way that they confront life, but yet they want to find out things that maybe they did wrong, that they made mistakes, and that part of it I liked. There is an ending that sort of ties everything together at the end. But I guess the magical realism was, there was a lot of repetition. And I don't know if that's because of the translation. There are some interesting aspects of Japanese living in Japan, like they talk about the cicada season. And when I first went to Japan and I heard the cicadas, I think it's at the end of summer, I didn't know, it's so loud, you would not believe it. And what they are, and I'm not looking this up or anything, but they live underground, and then they come out for a short period of time, make these noises that are very loud, and then they die, which is very, I mean, there's a lot of meaning to that in Japanese culture. And also what I found out, there's different kinds of cicadas that come out in different places and different, not only different places, but different times of the year. So there's a lot to like in this book, but it's not my favorite Japanese translated book. And I think there's a series that the author has in this. Anyway, now is 4 books enough to make a mid-month wrap-up? But I do have one more book, and I read this in the beginning of the 2 weeks. And I wasn't going to talk about it because I also didn't love it. But like all of the other books, it had something that I could keep on reading. So the book is called How to Calm Your Mind by Chris Bailey. Now Chris Bailey is, and I think this is where the problem for me is, he comes from an area where a guy whose previous books were all about increasing productivity. So he's pairing the idea of wanting to be more productive with the need to be more calm so that you can be more productive. So that part of it, I don't really connect with, because I'm not looking to be more productive. I'm looking maybe to be less productive. That doesn't sound good. Happier, let's say. And the part of the book where he talks about how you become calm, those things are very good, and but they're sort of recycled stuff that I've read in other books. And if you've read self-help books, you know, it's going to help you feel less anxious. And I think he says in the beginning of the book that he started having a panic attack when he was doing one of his productivity seminars. And that's when he realized that maybe he was doing too much and that he needed to calm down and how to do it. So if that's you, maybe you'll like this book. Before I leave, I just wanted to, like I said, thank everybody who gave me so much good advice about keeping up this channel. You know, keep it up. We care about you. That meant the world to me, and I thank you all so much, and for encouraging me with my new endeavor. I guess it's being productive. And also, I even had a therapist tell me that her mother was not alive, and if she wishes she had advice about getting older, she might be in her 40s, so that she thought that my plan was good. So I got the thumbs up from my therapist, as well as a very good friend who messaged me. I had a lot of messages, and messaged me and said that she needed that help for her parents who are aging. And it made me feel like my next endeavor of starting a new Booktube channel is not in vain, that I can do it, that I'm stronger and I can do hard things. So, you know, this was the mid-month wrap-up. It wasn't, to be honest, a very successful, there weren't any 5-star reads, but sometimes that's okay. And right now I'm watching a lot of Booktube, and I've got a lot of books waiting for me at the library, and I plan to do a big haul, a library haul that has been asked for very soon. And I'm hoping that these books will be, at least one of them will be a 5-star read. Please let me know in the comments, have you read any of these books? Were they 5-star reads for you? Were any of them 5-star reads for you? And tell me why. I really, really want to know. And if you haven't already subscribed, please do. I do appreciate it. And I will keep this channel going. So thank you so much for watching, liking, commenting. And you see my Aloha shirt. It's actually my partner's Aloha shirt. It's pretty hot today. And I know you feel really sorry for me if you're in a cold place right now. But I do have the air conditioner on, and I don't have it on very often. But sometimes right before a rain, and we're very dry here. And yeah, what's happening in Los Angeles is, and what happened in Maui, you know, very, very sad. And we also live in a dry area. So I'm hoping for rain for everyone who's living, and that everyone has peace, and we get through this horrible time right now with so many things going on, with, you know, strength and courage. So until we meet again very soon, I wish you aloha.